The old cowboy named Jack lived alone on the wide plains of Texas. His ranch stretched far and quiet, with only the sound of wind brushing over the grass and the creak of an old wooden gate. He had no wife, no children, and few words to share. People in town said he had a heart made of stone. They didn't know that sometimes at night he sat on his porch with a cup of black coffee, staring at the stars, wondering if God had forgotten him. It was late autumn when the story began. The air was cold and dry, and dust clouds drifted across the highway. Jack was riding home from the small town of Clayton after selling a few cattle. The sun had gone low behind the hills, painting everything gold and red. As he rode past a narrow dirt road, his horse snorted and slowed. Jack looked up and saw something that made him stop. At first, he thought it was just an old fence with torn rope flapping in the wind. But then he saw movement, small and weak. He dismounted slowly, boots pressing into the dry soil, and walked closer. His chest tightened when he realized what he was seeing. A young girl, barely 18, was tied to the fence post. Her wrists were red and bruised from the rough rope. Her clothes were torn, her face pale and her eyes half open like she had given up on being found. Jack's voice cracked a little when he spoke. "Hey there, miss. You all right?" She flinched at the sound, then tried to speak, but her throat was dry. Jack quickly cut the rope with his pocket knife and caught her before she fell. She was light as a feather, shivering in his arms. "Easy now," he murmured. "You're safe." He carried her to his horse and wrapped her in his old jacket. When she tried to protest, saying something about her mother, her voice broke apart. Jack didn't ask questions then. He could see she was scared and weak. He just lifted her onto the saddle and rode back toward his ranch. By the time they reached the small wooden house, night had fallen. The stars were bright and the wind carried the faint sound of coyotes. Jack carried her inside and laid her gently on the couch near the fireplace. He stoked the fire and poured warm water into a tin cup. She drank slowly, her trembling fingers barely holding the cup. "What's your name?" Jack asked quietly. "Maya," she whispered. "My name's Maya," he nodded. "Well, Maya, you're safe here. You can rest as long as you need." Tears welled in her eyes, and for a moment she looked too lost to speak. Then she said softly, "My mother. She tied me up, said she didn't want me anymore. She was drunk. She just laughed when I begged her." Jack didn't say a word. His jaw tightened and he turned away for a moment, pretending to fix the fire. He had seen hard things in his life, wars, droughts, and broken families. But nothing made his chest ache like hearing that. The next morning, the girl woke to the smell of coffee and eggs. The ranch kitchen was small but warm. Jack had set a plate for her, though he didn't sit down to eat himself. He just stood by the window, staring at the horizon. "Eat," he said. "You'll need your strength." She ate slowly, still unsure if she was allowed to stay. "I'll go soon," she said softly, eyes down. "I don't want to cause trouble." Jack looked at her. "You're not causing trouble. You just need a place to heal. You stay as long as you want." Maya didn't know how to respond. No one had ever spoken to her with such steady kindness. For the first time in years, she felt safe. Days passed and color began to return to her face. She helped Jack feed the horses, water the plants, and clean the barn. She was quiet but hardworking, and the cowboy noticed how careful she was with the animals. Even the wild mare, who never let anyone near, stood still when Maya approached. Jack would watch her from a distance, pretending to be busy, though something warm stirred in his heart each time he saw her smile faintly at the animals. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Jack and Maya sat on the porch in silence. The wind smelled like rain. Maya turned to him and asked, "Why do you live alone, sir?" He looked at the fading sky for a moment. "Because life turned that way, I guess. Lost some people I cared for. After that, I just kept working. The land doesn't leave, at least," she nodded. "Maybe you were waiting. For what?" "For someone to come who needed you," she said softly. Jack didn't answer, but her words stayed in his mind long after she went inside. A few days later, a truck stopped near the ranch. Jack stepped out, wiping his hands on his jeans, and saw a woman climb down. Her clothes were dirty, her eyes unfocused, and her voice loud. It was Maya's mother. She had found her way there after hearing from someone in town that an old cowboy had taken her daughter in. Jack didn't say anything at first, but Maya came running from the house, freezing when she saw her mother. The woman shouted, "You think you can take my girl from me? She's mine." Her voice shook with anger and confusion. Jack stepped between them. Ma'am, this girl isn't property. She's been hurt enough. She's my blood, the woman snapped. You got no right, Jack spoke calmly but firmly. Maybe so. But being blood doesn't mean breaking a child. You left her to die out there. I found her. She's safe now. For a moment, the woman glared at him, her hands trembling. Then she cursed under her breath, turned around and stumbled back to her truck. The sound of the engine faded down the dirt road until there was only silence again. Maya stood frozen, tears on her cheeks. Jack walked up slowly and put a hand on her shoulder. You're not alone anymore, he said quietly. You hear me? You got a home now. From that day, something shifted between them. It wasn't just kindness anymore. It was family. Jack began teaching her about ranch life, how to mend fences, ride properly, fix a saddle, and take care of the herd. She learned fast and smiled more often. The neighbors in town started noticing too. They'd see the two of them riding together on Sundays, the quiet cowboy and the girl with bright eyes. Sometimes at night, Maya would sit on the porch like Jack once did, looking at the stars. She still carried pain, but it didn't own her anymore. Jack never asked about the past again. He believed the present was enough. A few months later, he drove to town and signed a few papers. When he returned, Maya found the documents on the table, official adoption papers. She looked up at him shocked. You adopted me? Jack nodded, his weathered face softening with a rare smile. You needed a father, he said, and I reckon I needed a daughter. Tears fell freely down her cheeks. She hugged him, and for the first time in years, he felt something heal inside him. The ranch no longer felt empty. The old cowboy had finally found the family he never thought he'd have. Outside, the wind carried the scent of spring across the plains. The lonely man was lonely no more, and the girl once left to the cold had finally found her home. Winter faded slowly, and life on the ranch found a gentle rhythm again. Maya had settled into her new home like she had always belonged there. The mornings began early, with the soft sound of boots on wooden floors and the smell of coffee filling the air. Jack still rose before sunrise, but now there was another cup waiting for him on the table. Maya made it strong the way he liked. She'd smile shyly when he said thanks, and he'd nod in return, pretending not to notice how that small habit brightened his whole day. She had grown stronger in just a few months. Her skin had a healthy color again, and her hands, once soft and shaking, had turned steady and skilled. She learned how to saddle the horses, carry hay, and fix fences without complaint. The animals trusted her completely, and Jack often said she had a quiet gift with them. Even the stubborn mule that kicked at everyone stood still when Maya came near. Sometimes Jack would stand by the barn and watch her work. She reminded him of someone, perhaps himself when he was young and still believed in second chances. He never said much, but his eyes spoke plenty. The ranch had once been a silent, lonely place, but now the laughter of a young girl echoed through the open fields. One morning, Maya came running into the barn, her face lit with excitement. Jack, the mare had her foal last night, she said, nearly out of breath. Jack followed her to the stable, and there, lying beside the mare, was a small, wobbly-legged colt. Maya knelt beside it, whispering softly. The foal pressed its nose against her arm as if it already knew her voice. Jack smiled. Seems like you were born for this life, he said. I never thought I'd have a life like this, she replied quietly. Before you found me, I didn't even think I had a future. Jack turned to look at her. Well, we make our own future now, he said. Both of us. As months went by, people in the nearby town began to notice the change in the old cowboy. He wasn't the quiet shadow they remembered. When he came into town, he smiled more, and he even started talking to folks again. Some of the townspeople were surprised when they saw him bring Maya along to the general store, introducing her proudly as his daughter. The shopkeeper, Mrs. Allen, said with a grin, About time you stopped living like a ghost, Jack. He chuckled, though a little embarrassed. Guess the ranch got noisy, he replied. Back at home, life wasn't always easy. There were bills to pay, fences to mend, and storms that tore through the land. One summer afternoon, a fierce storm rolled in without warning. The sky turned dark and the wind howled through the valley. Jack ran outside to secure the barn doors, shouting for Maya to stay inside. But when he turned, he saw her running toward the pasture, trying to lead the cattle away from the broken fence line. Maya, get back! He shouted, but she didn't stop. She waved her arms, guiding the frightened animals toward safety as rain began to pour. When it was over, both of them were soaked to the bone, covered in mud but laughing breathlessly. You got more heart than sense, Jack said, shaking his head. She smiled. Guess I learned that from you. That night, as thunder rolled in the distance, they sat by the fire with warm blankets and hot soup. Jack looked at her and said softly, I'm proud of you, kid. It was the first time he'd ever said those words to anyone. Maya lowered her eyes, hiding a tear. Thank you. Dad, she whispered. That one word, Dad, hit him harder than a hammer. He didn't respond at first, just stared at the flames, but inside, something long frozen finally melted. After that, they worked side by side like a true team. Maya started keeping ranch records, balancing expenses, and even finding better buyers for their cattle online. Through an old computer she fixed herself. Jack didn't understand much about technology, but he trusted her completely. Under her care, the ranch began to do better than it had in years. One day, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from the county fair committee, inviting Jack to participate in the annual livestock competition. He had ignored those events for years, saying he didn't need anyone's praise. But Maya encouraged him. You should go, she said. You and your horses deserve to be seen. Jack smiled faintly. We, you mean? You've been doing the hard work too, she grinned. Then we'll both go. The fair was busy and bright, filled with people, animals, and music. Jack hadn't seen that much life in one place for decades. Maya wore a simple plaid shirt, jeans, and a smile that seemed to lift the whole day. They entered their prize horse, a tall brown stallion named Dusty, in the main event. When the judges called Jack's name as the winner, the crowd cheered. He looked down at Maya, who was clapping with tears in her eyes. You did it, she shouted. We did it, he corrected, placing the blue ribbon in her hands. That evening, as they drove home under the wide Texas sky, Maya turned to him. You know, when I first came here, I thought my life was over, she said softly. But now I know it was just beginning. Jack smiled at the road ahead. Funny thing about second chances, he said. They don't come easy, but when they do, they're worth everything. As the years passed, the bond between them grew stronger. Maya became known around town as the girl who turned the old cowboy's life around. People admired her for her hard work and kindness. She often helped other young girls who were struggling, reminding them that no one's past defined their future. Jack supported her every step of the way, proud beyond words. When Maya turned 21, she surprised Jack with something. She had saved enough money from the ranch profits to buy new fencing, repair the barn roof, and repaint the old house. You gave me a home, she said as they stood outside looking at the fresh paint. Now it's my turn to give back. Jack's eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. You already gave me everything I ever needed, he said. That night they sat on the porch watching the sunset together just like they used to. The air was calm, the sky painted in gold and pink. Jack leaned back in his chair, his hat tilted over his eyes. You know, he said slowly, there was a time I thought I'd die alone out here, but I reckon God had other plans. Maya looked at him with a smile. Maybe he thought you were too stubborn to give up, she teased gently. He laughed, a deep, genuine sound that carried through the quiet land. Maybe so, he agreed. As the stars appeared one by one, Maya reached over and took his hand. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. For finding me that night. For not giving up on me. Jack squeezed her hand back. You saved me just as much, kid. You gave me a reason to keep going. The night deepened and silence settled around them again. The good kind, warm and peaceful. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of the earth and the memory of all they had overcome. Years later, people in the nearby towns would still talk about the cowboy and his adopted daughter, the quiet man who found hope again, and the girl who turned his lonely ranch into a home filled with laughter. Some said fate brought them together. Others said it was a miracle. But to Jack and Maya, it was simple. It was love, the pure kind that didn't need words or blood to make it real. And when the sun rose each morning over the open plains, lighting the old wooden fence where they first met, it seemed to shine a little brighter, because somewhere in that place, two broken hearts had found their way home again.